Rifkin. I'm very happy to say a few words about Milton today. It occurred to me as I was coming here that the timing of this event means that I can't watch the Pats football game, and that seemed very appropriate for an event dedicated to a composer who, rumor always had it, did all of his composing in front of the television watching Sunday afternoon pro football. When I was talking with a colleague the other day about Milton, he said that he felt there was just so many memories, so many things to say that he had to write down what he would say, and it occurred to me, my God, yes, I'm scared stiff of doing this without a text either, so I've written a brief text that I shall now proceed to read to you. While thinking of what to say today, I told a musicologist friend about the event. He replied, "You know, do you, that my son was patted on the head by Milton Babbitt at the age of 3 months. At the time, I thought it was a bit like somebody of the older generation having been patted on the head by Brahms. But now I sometimes wonder whether it isn't why he became an architect." Milton, of course, would have loved it. At the same time, however, my friend's joke encapsulates one of the most obvious tropes of how the larger world thought of Milton. Some of us as graduate students at Princeton couldn't resist falling into step every now and then as well. How many times did we make merry at his apparent inability to play a 5/1 cadence without jazzy added tones, something like this? But obviously those added tones told you something more important. For Milton, to paraphrase and invert a favorite line of his about a then very highly positioned composer, certainly could find middle C on the piano. But for all his fearsome intellectual rigor, a part of his soul lay always in Broadway, and that part, atavistically it seemed, couldn't help but complicate a simple cadence. And, need I say it, Milton loved complicating things anyway. It belonged to his paradoxical high modernist creed always to seek maximum complexity, he might have said richness, although at the same time asserting maximum comprehensibility. He took the latter seriously. One can recall him explaining how psychological tests established certain limits of perception. We could take in, if I still have the detail correct, no more than 7, perhaps 6 bits of information at a time. No one needed him to tell us what that meant. For that matter, few of us studying with him, whether as composers, theorists, or musicologists, felt any disposition to challenge the musical relevance, let alone the accuracy of such nuggets. To whatever degree we shared the faith. And even if we didn't, the power of Milton's example made it hard to stay outside the charmed circle. His awesome smarts seemed able to quash any doubt. He had a compelling answer for everything. As more than one observer remarked, moreover, he didn't suffer fools gladly, and in his company, even the most brilliant of us could feel foolish. But all this too seems to contribute to yet another misguided trope about Milton, the forbidding high priest of high modernism. In truth, of course, no high priest ever instilled less terror in his acolytes. Outsiders didn't know what a charismatic force he could exert, and not as a remote and severe presence, but as the kind of sparkling and approachable uncle who would indeed pat a 3-month-old kid on the head. Not for nothing did virtually every graduate student sooner or later refer to him by the common sobriquet for a well-known comedian of the time, who had the same first name as Milton, and whose last name also began with B. You always had fun around Milton, and you always profited from his seemingly limitless knowledge about which car to drive, which Chinese restaurant to eat at, which cigarette, if you went in for such things, to smoke. You delighted in the way he always identified the target of some delicious bit of malice as "my dear friend." And at the same time, you know that he did not mean that appellation as an empty gesture. For Milton, in fact, had an immense gift of friendship, one that extended to his fellow composers in particular, in ways that, again, outsiders would hardly have suspected. He never showed obvious partisanship in the composers he admired. He could speak warmly of work far at variance from his own, so long as he detected serious craft and intelligence behind it. Moreover, Milton never showed, when push came to shove, anything less than absolute solidarity with his fellow composers, no matter what their persuasion. He understood that all of them, no matter how outwardly successful, belonged to an endangered species whose survival he would never do anything to undermine. So you came to Milton prepared to respect him, fear him, even hate him, and you wound up loving him. How not? Shortly before I left Princeton the summer of 1970, I got married. Milton sent my new wife and me a congratulatory telegram from his native Jackson, Mississippi, in Yiddish. Well, at least he told us he did, and expressed no little chagrin when we told him that we never in fact received it. But I had every reason to believe him, and I believe him now. And I love him still.